Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Break Free from Your Monkey Mind, Season 4, Episode 9. And my name's Tony, and my co-host this week is Leanne. How are you, Leanne?
I'm very well, Tony. Thank you for having me on again.
Thank you. I can't believe it's right. We said this before we come on here, how far into the series we actually are now. The ninth episode now. It's amazing how quick it's actually gone. Just shows how good the series has actually been. Uh, we were supposed to have another guest on the night, to be honest, but she isn't too well at the moment. So we've rearranged for her to come next week. But it made it quite appropriate then to think there was something that I've been talking to people about recently. I mean, Leanne just had a long conversation on it about self-awareness and what does that actually mean to people. And it was quite good because even with us talking about it, who are both in this field, we had slightly different perceptions on what it actually was there. So I thought we'd have a chat about that tonight. But what we'd love is your input. So after this episode, if there's anything that you think that, yeah, I agree with it or you don't, please let us know and we'll give us the email addresses at the end. So first of all, start with you then, Leanne. What is self-awareness to you?
So, self-awareness to me is taking care of yourself, finding your center and reflecting on your day and just taking note of your emotions and your feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was something we took discussion on, is that self-awareness to me similar. I do agree with the focus part. I think we have to focus on our self-awareness because I think we talk about self-esteem, we talk about self-worth, self-value, but to have all of that, we need to be self-aware. So we need to understand what our good points are, what are things that are not so good, how do we find them out and how do we change them? So what we want to discuss tonight is that self-awareness helps you to know your own emotions. And if you know your emotions, it means you'll be able to manage them. And if you do that, it helps you to understand other people's because the way they react in certain ways, you might see some of that in yourself. That helps you improve your relationships. And most importantly, it was is motivate yourself. So first, thinking about that then, and is that you're saying about it to you is saying it's focus and being aware of how you are that day. So how do you actually do that? How do you check how aware you are for that day?
That's actually one of the hardest things to actually answer about yourself. Is being, how do you be aware of who you are? You're too busy taking care of everybody else and the hustle and bustle of your everyday life to actually stop and think, how do I find my own self-awareness? It's actually a really difficult question. So what I do for me personally is I do stop at the end of each day and reflect back on my day, things that have happened, things that I've done, my reactions to other people and the things that they do and they've done, and their reactions to me. And I
Mm-hmm.
look at it then at what have I learned from today, and are my emotions in check? Am I aware of what I'm doing? But it is a very difficult question to answer, to actually acknowledge yourself and your own emotions. It's easy to acknowledge somebody else's, but to look deep inside and talk about, how you're feeling
Mm-hmm.
is a very it's a very difficult question to answer
Yeah, I
without,
mean,
yeah. Let's
because
say
that's
with
why I'm asking the question because it is something that when I talk to people about it, I don't think they actually sometimes understand. Um, because there's a lot of self things, like they say, self care, self value, self worth, self belief, self esteem, self concept. There's all these different things. But how do you, when you're trying to do it, you say it's difficult to look at yourself. It can be, but where does self awareness come from, or how does it start? When do we first become self aware?
we first become self-aware when we acknowledge how other people are reacting towards us.
Because you know it's quite surprising this, but you actually become self aware from they think from approximately 12 months. Do you know that? Because when we first start to move about, what we are, you think a child like that, they're on their knees or crawling about and feeling, touching everything. So you're becoming aware of your
Mm.
environment. So you become self-aware in some ways. It's like, oh, I don't want to be doing that, or oh, no, I don't get near that thing. So they're starting to get, they might not understand what self-awareness obviously is for a child,
Yeah.
but they become self-aware in how they fit in with their environment. And as you grow from that, you become more self-aware. So for example, you start learning to walk. So you become more aware of things in a higher level, which you don't really notice so much when you're on the ground, when you're crawling about. Then how you interact with your parents, siblings, if you've got any, or any family that come and visit. So you become aware of, you said earlier about emotions and that. You start
Yeah.
to become aware. You don't understand what emotions and feelings are at that age, but you become aware of other people's as well as you. How do they react to you when you say a thing, or when you cry, or when you're happy? So you becoming aware of that situation, and we gradually grow and grow, and we become more and more aware as we're growing. So from there, you start learning right from wrong. Then you learn about the world as you move into school, and then high school, totally different again. But then your mind and body changes as you develop as a teenager. So you're constantly self-aware. You're constantly trying to find that awareness to understand who you actually are and where do you fit in. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, absolutely. And it is. It's about being in that present moment and acknowledging what's happening around you and to you.
Mm-hmm. So being self-aware and being in the moment can be a good thing, because you're right, is you can only be self-aware at that time where you are at that moment in time. And I know you mentioned something earlier, but too many people look too far ahead. That's what you said.
Yeah. Yeah, so as human beings, we're always worrying about what tomorrow's going to bring, or next week, or next year. We're always worrying about what hasn't happened yet, or we're worrying about the past and what has happened. Well, we've got no control of the next few minutes. We've got no
Mm-hmm.
control over the future. We've got no control over what's happened in the past. We can learn how to manage that. So, what are we focusing on? We should be focusing on this present moment, the actual moment that we're in now, which will bring your mind back to acknowledging your emotions and focusing purely on where you're at and who you are right now. You couldn't possibly, I do it myself though. I do worry about the future and about this, that, and the other. But I think as human beings, we all do. But why do we? Why are we worried about something that's not even happened yet, that we've got no control over, when what we have got control over is this present moment and who we are
Mm-hmm.
and our awareness?
But then if you are aware of everything that you said it's happening in your life, can that also make you worry about the future? Because you don't want to lose what you've got. So if you become aware that your main thing is your family unit, everything you've got here. So do you think that's one of the reasons that people do look that far ahead and start saying, well, what if this happens? It's not so much they want these things to happen. They want them not to happen, but you focus on them.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And you do. You focus on the negative. You're focusing on the things that you don't want, which ends up coming to you because you're so fixated on it. Instead
Mm,
of concentrating on the good things, it's human nature. It's human nature that we all do it.
mm,
It's getting habits out of that, where obviously learning to control your emotions in the sense of managing them. As we both say, we hate using that word control. So managing your emotions, and managing and dealing with and processing what's happened in the past. How could you make what's happened different for the future? How can
mm,
you use them emotions and go through forward without the stress and the worry? Because it's very stressful. So how does that affect your emotions? How does that affect your awareness? Are you then focusing on who you are, or are you more concentrating on everything else?
mm. Yeah. And that's the thing, is how do we get away from, if we become self-aware, how do we then get away from worrying about losing what you've got, or worrying what can happen next? Why can't we just take every moment as it comes then? If we're totally self-aware of us and we know what our strengths are, we know what our limitations are, why can't we just stop this thing so nobody suffers from anxiety or fear of missing out or imposter syndrome or comparing, because you're just
That's
focused on that moment?
pretty simple, because we live in a world of technology. We live in a world of media. We live in a world of misery loves company. So we are living day to day with everything going on around us. So you are going to worry. You know, you hear that there's a stabbing in, you know, in the local supermarket, and you think, oh, I can't go to the supermarket now because what if that happens again? You know, there's a car crash down the road. There's an earthquake. There's a tsunami. There's all these different things which are publicised to you in the media. Now, if these things, if a lot of this stuff wasn't pushed on people 24/7, would people be calmer? Would people be less anxious, less worried? You know, I love my mum's attitude. She says that she lives in her own little bubble. She doesn't listen to news. She doesn't, as much as she goes on social media, it's closest friends and family that just post pictures and that. She's not listening to that day-to-day stuff. But when she does hear something, she goes into a panic mode by going, oh, that's just happened. I don't want to be around here anymore. Now, as I say, things like this are happening all the time. But because you are living in your bubble, you block it out. And what a lovely bubble to live in. And I always say that to her, it must feel lovely being in your bubble. And she goes, yeah, because I haven't got to worry about anybody else's issues going on around me, i.e. crime and everything else. And how wonderful would that be if we could all live in our own little bubble without having the media pushing things on us? That is it. That is the media.
Yeah. Does that sound like utopia? Everybody's in their own little bubble and doesn't interact with each other?
No, definitely interacting. But the bubble for her
You
is
go into someone else's bubble.
You can go into someone else's bubble if you want to, Tony. But it's keeping you, it's keeping the negatives out. So she focuses on the positive side of things, and she interacts. You know, she's social. She does everything else. But when it comes to the doom and gloom of the newspaper and the news, and you know, if my dad says, "Oh, this has happened in the news," she goes, "I'm not interested. I don't want to know." And okay, some people could say that's naive because she's dismissing what's happening. But at the same time, you know, what's going on in London isn't affecting her everyday life because she doesn't live in London and she wouldn't be going into London. Okay, yes, they do like to put things out so everyone is aware of what's going on, but does it need to be broadcast so far afield that people that live in small villages are panicking about things that are happening in big cities? They know they're never ever going to go there.
Is that then because they're not aware enough of how things actually happen, how things work? Because if you were totally aware and self-aware of that, you'd realise, wait a minute, I'm not anywhere near there. So that's not something that's going to impact me at this moment. So why would I bother about it?
That's possible.
On the other hand, then is self-awareness, to me, then I said, is about how I act, I said earlier, how I manage my emotions, how I understand my emotions, how I understand other people's emotions to improve my relationships with them. I need to understand how they react. So I need to understand my own self-awareness totally. So what we want people to realize is there's different ways you can do that. And we talked about this earlier. You said the first one you've mentioned there is you would reflect on your day. How would you actually do that? So if you had someone, a client saying, I want to be sure I'm more self-aware and I want to be able to reflect on my day. So what exactly does that mean to them? What could they do to reflect on that day?
So for me, I like to go somewhere on my own where it's quiet. There's no chattery noise around me, that I can just sort of sit there with my own thoughts and think back on the day. I sometimes do a bit of meditation so that I can clear my mind after I've reflected, just so that I'm basically wiping the slate clean before I go to bed. And that way I can wake up refreshed the next morning without the chitter chatter still in my head and the worries and everything of the day before. Another one, sometimes I do actually ask people closest to me how I've been that day, just by recognizing their emotions towards me. So if somebody's a little bit, you know, quiet towards me or hostile towards me, I think, oh, okay, what have I done? What have I said, or how have I acted for them to be that way towards me? And it's very hard, again, to actually ask somebody, what have I actually done to upset you? Or, you know, what's your hostility towards me? To get an honest answer, but then do we always want to hear that honest answer? If somebody turns around and says, ah, well, you know, you said something earlier and I wasn't happy, or you've been in a foul mood all day, do you then sort of stop and think to yourself, have I? Or is it they've been in the mood and it's reflecting onto me? So it's what I would say to you, Tony, with obviously people around you that have obviously given you reflection. Would you say you find it harder for people to give you advice or criticism of your day and you as a person if they're closer to you than a stranger on the street?
No, I think I've grown over the years, especially over the last few years. I would actually find it easier, either someone I know or a stranger, giving me criticism than giving me praise.
So would you take
I
that
think
criticism as a learning curve and something to reflect on, or would you take that as they're criticizing me, how dare they? You know, they want to look at themselves first.
being honest, for all of us the same, not just me, but I think it's how it's delivered. I think it depends on the way they say it and what they say. Constructive criticism is criticism, but that's given in such a way that is to help you or to help you to improve or develop. Criticism for the sake of criticism, no. Then no, I wouldn't be happy if someone just did that and didn't give in at the back of it. For example, if someone says to me, or I didn't like the way you were delivering that this morning, okay, nothing else at the end of that, that's just criticism. If they said, I didn't like the way you delivered that this morning, but if you would have just done it, maybe spoke a little bit, asked for a question, spoke, but broke up a little bit, maybe I could have understood it better. Then that makes sense. That's constructive criticism. What they're saying is, it's not just that I didn't like it, it isn't right for them. So again, it goes back to what I said about how understand other people's emotions. You need to understand how what you do impacts other people,
So
how they take it.
On that note, then, if at the end of your day and you've self-reflected, you're aware of your emotions and what's happened throughout your day, and you come to a realization that you have been a bit of a pain to somebody or you've said something, would you then acknowledge that and apologize to that person the next day, or would you write it off and go, tomorrow's a new day? Or in that moment, if you notice that throughout the day, would you take stock of your emotion towards that person and say, I'm sorry, what I've said may come across wrong? How would you deal with your emotions on that side?
I think again it depends on the situation. If it's someone I've got to deal with the next day and off the back of something that I've done today, then yeah, I'd need to say I've reflected on it last night, and I would say it that way: is I've reflected on what I said last night, and I think I could have done it better. So if I caused any offence, I'm sorry. What I should have done was and said something that way. So and then explain about how it should have been, rather than just saying I'm sorry for what happened, because that's not really an explanation. And to me, just saying sorry about something can be an empty gesture unless I gave a reason why and how I could have done differently.
Yeah, I mean, back in beginning of our podcast, a few episodes in, we had Mark join us, and he was very self-aware of his attitude towards people because of the chronic pain that he was suffering. So he made a point of saying that he would always apologize. He'd have a list of people to apologize to either later that day or the next day, because he was aware of his actions. But at that moment, he couldn't process it to be able to apologize to the person there and then, but later on he felt he had to, for not just for them but for himself, to be able to process and move on.
I think I had that a few years ago. Never knew I was doing it at the time, but then I felt really guilty in that, and it was similar reason I said before. Mark understood where he was coming from with that, because I could empathise with the pain that I went through. And one person told me once they knew I was in that bad pain because I was so quiet, so just leave him. Otherwise, he'll bite. And I never knew I was doing that. I would bite at people because the pain was so bad. Because it's difficult for anybody that's not been through it to understand that every single word someone says, every sound, every wee nuance in their face, everything gets to you. And you don't mean it, but every single bit of your body goes on edge. And like Mark's saying, you do probably do it. And I didn't. I know I suffered with that. And I never knew I was really that bad in doing it. You always think it's the other person because you don't see how how or why it's happening. And I think over the last few years, because of what I had to do to help myself with this, that's when I became a bit more astute at self-reflection, becoming self-aware, is that I've had to reevaluate how I deal with things all the time and how I
Yeah.
think about things. And I think Mark's point was, it's not just about the apology, it's how you feel about the apology. So if you don't do it, how would you feel then? If they were happy to just leave it and don't, it's done, it's dusted, but he might know as a person, he'd go, no, because that just wasn't right what happened. But then if he's doing it again later on a time and again, but each time he's in pain, he's not really learning, because he's still going to go and do that. So what he's learning, he gets himself in a cycle,
Yeah.
because you get stuck with that. And that's what I had done without realizing I was in a cycle, is that I thought I was going into this little bubble, like your mum. I would
Yeah.
sit there, headphones on, and people just didn't leave me alone. I would walk, and I could walk all day, 12, 14, 16 hours a day, no problem. I'd just sit like that and let me do that, because the pain was that bad that I knew I was on edge or it wouldn't be right. But now when I look at things, I think that I like asking other people about how well I've done or have not, because it allows me to keep improving. I don't think I could have took the criticism the same 3, 4, 5 years ago. I would have been the same with that, because of pride. I thought I was doing everything good. I thought I was doing great things, and then you realise you're not. It's like, what do you think? What do you know? You do realise that everybody does that, but you don't always realise why. And
Yeah.
that's why I said about this subject, self-awareness, for anybody watching it, there is different ways that they can do it. We said there, one, you said is reflect, which is great. Journaling is a great way of reflection. We talk about this all the time. We've talked about it so many times in each series, really. But depending on how you do it, some people it's because gratitude, things they're grateful for that day, put them in at night. Some people it's to celebrate the achievements they've done. They've done something that day that maybe they couldn't have done. And another ones will be self-awareness. They'll actually realise things about themselves. When, do you know, if I hadn't sat down at this time and done this, I probably wouldn't have noticed. And I've said before, the one thing I like to do a little bit at night on my own, and I put music on and I do it because I find the easiest way. Other people say when you do mindfulness, you need silence. I don't. I need stimulation. And I put a music on at night and I'll lie there before I go to sleep. And all I'm doing is clearing myself from that day. Everybody knows me, those things I do, a little thing called a hypnotic shower or hypnotic protocol. Just clear everything out from the day. You do that and you do a journaling. That's a brilliant way of becoming self-aware, because you start to realise what you're writing each day. Maybe the things you become aware of are things you hadn't had before or you've not realised before.
Yeah, I completely agree. In my younger days, I used to have a positivity jar, which was just a jam jar type thing. And I used to have little post-it notes, and anything that happened good throughout the day, I'd make a little note of it, fold it up, put the date on it, fold it up and stick it in the jar. And at the end of the year, I'd empty it all out and I'd just go through every bit and I'd go, oh, I remember that. And it would always bring a smile to my face, because like, yeah, on 1st of July, blah, 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 this happened, that happened. I remember them memories, which are memories I probably would have just put to the back of my mind, but they're things that I brought them back forward, and it kind of ended the year on a positive note. Especially if you'd had a rubbish year, you can look back at that jar is actually filling up. So although you feel it was a complete negative year, look at how many positives were in there. And I did that for many, many years. But then obviously as I got older, family life and work and everything took over, and I just didn't find, that was the thing, I didn't find time, because I felt that wasn't necessary anymore because I had too many other things to do. But I was thinking about this the other day with my family, and I thought to myself, do you know what, it would be great for my little one if at the end of every day we made some little post-it notes and popped them in a jar, and then on Christmas Eve we sat down and we reflected back on all the positives, because it'll be memories that we can all laugh about, oh, you know, smile about. And how lovely is that? Because you know something right at the end of the year or Christmas Eve or wherever you want to do it, that is something that's positive that's going to be there, rather than the negative. And especially I think Christmas Eve is a good one, because you get the whole build up, which is the stress of Christmas coming up. And in Christmas Eve, as soon as those shops shut, I don't know about you or anybody else watching this, but as soon as the shops shut, I kind of go, oh, the shops are shut, that's it. Can't do no more. Can't do any more shopping, can't do any more food shopping. And my dad's motto was, if you haven't got it now, tough. You know, it's done. And it was always that whole, you could feel your whole body just going, oh, okay, you know, tomorrow is going to be here. We're just going to get on with it, and that's it. But wouldn't it be nicer to sit there Christmas Eve and go, oh, shops are shut. Let's open our positivity jar and see what we've had throughout the year that we can reflect on. What a great tradition that would be. So that's going to be my new tradition.
Yeah, well, I've got one to counteract that then for me. So I'll throw mine in it, right? And that would be the journaling, said, and doing it. Similar idea. Doing whatever makes you aware, your gratitude, or what you really achieved that day, whatever you want to be then. But you're not allowed to look at them. You can't look back at them until one day.
Yeah.
You're only allowed it on one day of the year. And that's on, in Scotland, we call it Hogmanay. You call it New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
So just before midnight, you look back on your year, and you're looking back to what you've done that year. You look back on it and to say, okay, what have I achieved this year? And without doing anything else, just do it. And how many people would come up with 3 or 4 things? Then get your journal out and look at how much you actually did achieve in that year. How good does that make you feel at the end of a year when you look at all the things that you've done? It'll be so great that year. And that makes you more positive what you're going to be able to do the next year. You're wonder going to go, when I sit down next year at this time, how much more am I going to have done? Where am I going to be then? So you finish the year on such a high because you've looked at all these amazing things you've done. Yet all it's took you is 2 or 3 minutes every night to write 3 things, and just don't look back at them at all. Not on a weekly, not monthly. Just do it at the end of the year. Look back. But can you imagine doing that as a family? And all the things you've achieved as a family, doing that together on Hogmanay. And then the bill's coming. And then you start that new year and you're starting that on a high, because the last thing you remember from the year before is all the positive things you did. That makes you more self-aware of what you can achieve and what you've done.
Yeah, definitely 100%. And I know there's something that we done at the beginning of the year and that I've always done every year is write a letter to myself.
So you're going to do 12 months.
Yeah, what I'm going to do in 12 months as if I've already got there, and then, you know, write the letter. I do that a lot with my clients as well. I do get them to write a letter of what they want to do in the next 12 months, because it's something that they can work towards, because once they've put it down on paper, it's kind of done. You know, you've done it, so you've got to do it. So my clients have been having some great fun because they've already listed it out, and they get it halfway through the year and they kind of forget what they put in their letter, but they're naturally just doing it because they've already put pen to paper. So their brain's already said, we've done that. And they're having great fun doing it. And the achievements that some are doing, even things that they wouldn't have ever dreamed of doing, they're messaging me, telling me they've done them. And it's wonderful. And I'm looking forward to a lot of my new clients at the end of this year turning around and saying what their achievements are and how they've done. And I do it. I've done it for years. I've always written letters to myself. And sometimes I write them really far in advance as well. Okay, I'm not, I know you think I'm a witch at times, Tony, but I'm not Mystic Meg. No, never.
Because your nickname Salem. I don't know why anybody would think that. No,
I don't know. I haven't even got a cat. You know, I haven't got a crystal ball. I can't see into the future, but I can, in my head, mentally plan for the future and then see where it takes me. And then in, say, 10, 20 years' time, when you look back on that letter, it's a little bit of fun as well. And it's something to do.
But it only can happen if we are totally self-aware, because looking at all the positives is great, but we said earlier, we also have to look at what do we need to change. What are the development things that we have to do? And that's why we're saying the first bit of reflection is brilliant. We can do that. So we can look at ourselves doing that. We can look at how we interact with other people. So that gives us a good indication of where we're at as well. How are we getting on? How do we feel when we're mixing other companies? Are we getting good relationships? Is there people not getting on with? Has the thing changed? And then the third bit you mentioned a bit earlier is the most important one to me is asking others, not just your family and friends, but asking maybe colleagues, people that don't know you as well, and get them to do it in a simple way. And I do this with everyone. Get them to take 3 things that they love about you, but 3 things they'd love to change about you. And it's amazing how people accept the 3 things they love very easily, but we don't always accept the other parts. But if it's done right and you're asking people to do it honestly, what they're trying to put down is things that you could change to develop, to improve yourself.
Yeah.
Again, it's constructive. It's not there to be bad. It's there to what you need to work on. And can you imagine what it's like then if you ask them 12 months later, like you said, so you send your letter to yourself, you do
Yeah.
this self-reflection thing, you get their input from them, and then 12 months later you go, do you remember last year I asked you what 3 things about me you like, what you'd like to change? Do you mind doing the same thing? And then compare it, get them to write it or get in an email, and then see if they can even remember. If they can't, look back on it and see how much has changed. And you might be quite surprised that the 3 things they didn't like before on to change are now your 3 top attributes, because you've had been self-aware enough to realize, if I want to work with other people, if I want to manage my emotions with other people, I need to understand what they see about me. I need to understand their perception of me, not only my perception that I think I'm portraying to them. So we need to get a bit of both of there to have compatibility and the stability in our own mind about this is the right way forward. And that's an amazing thing. And it's a bit like, maybe we should try that. Get somebody to do it for us now in 12 months of time, do the same question to the same people again and say, okay, if I did that, I might actually do it with clients. It's a new way of doing it. I'd get them to do it now and then come back to me, but then we can get them at the end and say, right, I'll get back in touch with you in 12 months. And again, don't tell them I'm going to do that, but then to ask the same question and just compare it.
Yeah,
and if they
definitely.
don't change, it's the same things. That lets you know you haven't been aware because you've not changed in any way. You've not developed. So if you wonder why maybe you've not moved on where you want to get, or you've not achieved certain goals, it's because you weren't aware of yourself.
Yeah,
so
and stepping
is a lot bigger subject than people think. And right back to what you said at the beginning, it's very difficult for us to actually look at ourselves and be totally self-aware. So we need, what you see in the mirror is one thing, what other people see, maybe something completely different. So
it's
that's something
definitely
for people to look at and try.
it's definitely a case of, isn't it, stepping out of your shoes and into someone else's to look back at you, stepping out of your comfort zone, or even, you know, step out of you, and instead of looking in that mirror, be that mirror looking back at you.
Mm-hmm. And what do you actually see? But more importantly, what do you think they act like, you talk like, things that you don't realize? Because the things that people forget are that language is not only verbal. Communication is not only verbal. It's how you look when you say it. It's your body language. And something we mentioned earlier, what part of you gives everything away?
Oh, my face gives everything away. I don't even have to say something, and it gives it away. People know exactly what I'm thinking.
Most people are the same. They try hard not to. I know I told the clients I'm quite good at it. I'm good at being a deadpan face when I have to. But when you're in conversation with other people outside, you don't think that way like you do in a controlled environment. So you do, and I'm the same as anybody else. I would give it away as well. I know I've done it recently. Someone mentioned me in a Zoom call, and somebody was talking and talking and talking, and I was waiting to hear another speaker, but they went on that long, but didn't run out of time for the other speaker. And I must have really gave them a real good look of daggers at the end of it, because somebody commented after, I hope they did not see the way you looked at them, forgetting it's recorded. So they would have seen it later on anyway and didn't see it then. But that was me trying not to do it. And yet I'd done it. So I had to be more self-aware after it, is watch how I am, even on camera, because you forget sometimes in Zoom, it's not just you're in a room, but a room that's being recorded. So you've got to be self-aware. Is, am I acting the right way? Do I look the right way? Am I speaking the right way? And is the language I'm using getting the message across the right way I want to? So it's quite a lot to think about with that. And it's a lot, but the simple things we've said is reflect on yourself. Great thing that Leanne said, do it each day. Maybe like we said with journaling, you can do it as one way, you can do it at night, or even just sit in your own, would you say, your own little bubble? Sit in your own wee bubble. And just do some meditation, some mindfulness, whatever. Listen to music, I do. Whatever it is, and just allow that to happen, reflect. Asking yourself, what am I like? Ask yourself, how do you act with other people? And then ask them and see if you get the same answer from yourself as what they give you. Well, that's all for us this week. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. It's quite a deep question. Looking at self-aware, we've probably just skimmed it. And even with all the things we've talked about tonight. So if you've got any ideas or things you think we could take it further, let us know, and maybe we can catch up in a later episode. We'll do that. Next week, we have a personal trainer coming on, a nutritionist, Mel. She's fantastic. So I'm looking forward to her being on next week. But until then, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, Leanne, how did they get in touch with you?
So best way is to email me, realityspace@gmail.com. That's the quickest and easiest way, because I'll always pick up my emails.
Okay, and for me, it's simple enough. It's Tony Gordon at changingmindlimited.com, and the Limited Ltd. So Tony Gordon at changingmindlimited.com. But I'm also on this website, but I'm also on all social media. If you go LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, anywhere, you'll find me on there somewhere. So just reach out. Any suggestions you've got for either of us that we could bring up in a subject, if you'd love to come on either this series or the next one as a guest, let us know as well what you would like to discuss, and we'll have a chat with you about that. Otherwise, please just take care of yourself, take care of your families, and we'll see you all again next week.
Thank you, Tony. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.